How can one reckless night at a party destroy a marriage in front of everyone who matters? What starts as a joke, me letting another man whisper in my ear, ends with a stack of legal papers on my kitchen table, and my husband's steady eyes watching as I am forced to explain everything. Can I blame him for what comes next, when all I did was dance, and he was the one who made it public? The action bowl gleamed under the dim event hall lights, and I felt more alive than I had in months. The insurance company's annual fundraiser was supposed to be boring, another corporate obligation where I'd smile politely and count the minutes until I could go home to my silent apartment and my absent husband. But Rafe Moreno changed everything. "You look like you need rescuing from this corporate wasteland," he said, appearing beside me with that easy smile that made my stomach flutter. At 29, he had the kind of confidence I remembered craving when I was younger. Before marriage and motherhood, an endless routine dulled everything to grey. "Maybe I do," I heard myself say, surprising us both. The wine had loosened my tongue, and for once, I didn't care about being proper Ottilia Vane, devoted wife and mother. Tonight, I wanted to be someone else entirely. Rafe's eyes lit up with interest. "I'm throwing an event next month, rooftop party, amazing view. You should come." "I'm married," I said, but my tone suggested it was more of a technicality than a barrier. "So, married people are allowed to have fun." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "When's the last time your husband took you somewhere exciting?" I couldn't remember. Caleb worked late most nights, lost in his data analysis projects, speaking to me in distracted monosyllables when he bothered to speak at all. Our 7-year-old son Nate got more animated conversation from his father than I did. "It's been a while," I admitted, accepting another glass of wine from a passing server. The music shifted to something with a deeper beat, and before I knew it, Rafe was leading me toward the makeshift dance floor. Other couples swayed together, but none of them looked like they were having as much fun as we were. I let him pull me close, let his hands rest on my waist, let myself forget about everything waiting for me at home. "You're beautiful," he murmured in my ear, and I felt 16 again. When was the last time Caleb had called me beautiful? When was the last time he'd looked at me like I was something worth pursuing? I laughed, throwing my head back, feeling my hair cascade over my shoulders. Someone's phone flashed nearby, probably taking pictures for the company newsletter, but I didn't care. Let them see a Tilly Vane having a good time for once. "Tell me about this event promotion business," I said, letting my hand rest on his chest. He was solid, warm, present in a way that felt foreign after years of Caleb's emotional distance. "It's all about creating experiences," Rafe explained, his thumb tracing small circles on my hip. "Making people feel alive, like they're part of something special." I did know. I'd forgotten what that felt like until tonight. We danced through 3 songs, talking and laughing, and I felt the weight of my everyday life lifting. Other partygoers smiled at us, some knowingly, others with barely concealed envy. Priya Shah, my manager, caught my eye from across the room and raised her eyebrows questioningly, but I just smiled and spun away from her judgment. "Your husband's a lucky man," Rafe said as the music slowed. "He doesn't seem to think so," I replied, immediately regretting the admission. But the wine and the attention had loosened all my careful boundaries. "His loss," Rafe said simply, and leaned down to whisper something in my ear about how I deserved better than being ignored. I was about to respond when I felt it, that prickle of awareness that meant someone was watching. I turned, scanning the crowd, and my heart stopped. Caleb stood 15 feet away, holding my jacket. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd said he had to work late, had to finish some crucial analysis for Monday's presentation. But there he was in his rumpled button-down and khakis, looking exactly like what he was, a 35-year-old data analyst who'd come to surprise his wife at her company party. Our eyes met across the room. His face was unreadable, that careful blank expression he wore when he was processing information he didn't like. He looked at me, then at Rafe's hand still resting on my waist, then back at me. I should have moved away from Rafe immediately. Should have rushed over to explain, to smooth things over with apologies and deflection. Instead, I froze, caught between guilt and defiance. Caleb walked slowly to an empty chair, folded my jacket neatly and placed it on the seat. Then he turned and walked toward the exit without a word. Shit, I breathed, reality crashing back. Was that him? Rafe asked, finally dropping his hands. I have to go, I said, but my feet didn't move. Part of me wanted to chase after Caleb, to explain that it was innocent, just dancing, just conversation. But another part of me, the part that had been ignored and taken for granted for months, whispered that he'd brought this on himself. By the time I made it outside, Caleb's car was gone. I stood in the parking lot, clutching my jacket as the night air sobered me up fast. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Lydia. Saw the pics on Instagram. Everything okay? Pictures? I opened Instagram to find that someone had already posted photos from the party. There I was, laughing in Rafe's arms, looking happier than I had in any photo with my husband in years. The comments were already starting. Get it, girl. Living your best life. Where's Caleb? I should have deleted the post, should have called whoever posted it and asked them to take it down. Instead, I found myself sharing it to my own story with the caption, "Finally, letting loose." The Uber ride home was silent except for the driver's radio playing soft jazz. I stared out the window at the city lights and told myself I'd done nothing wrong. I'd danced with someone. I'd felt attractive and interesting for the first time in months. If Caleb had a problem with that, maybe he should examine why his wife was so starved for attention that a stranger's compliments felt like water in the desert. The apartment was dark when I got home. Caleb's laptop was closed on the kitchen table, and I could see light under Nate's bedroom door, where Caleb was probably reading him a bedtime story. Normal family life, continuing without me. I poured myself another glass of wine and sat on the couch, scrolling through social media. The party photos were multiplying, being shared and commented on. In every single one, I looked radiant, alive, like someone worth wanting. My phone buzzed with a text from Rafe. Hope I didn't cause trouble. You looked like you needed to remember how amazing you are. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you for reminding me. When Caleb finally emerged from Nate's room, I was ready with my defense. But he didn't say anything about the party, didn't ask where I'd been or who I'd been with. He just said goodnight and went to our bedroom, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt more final than slamming would have. I finished my wine alone in the dark, telling myself this was his fault. If he'd been there for me, if he'd made me feel valued and desired, I never would have needed someone else's attention. He'd pushed me to this point with his neglect, and now he was sulking like a child instead of taking responsibility for his part in our problems. But as I finally headed to bed, I couldn't shake the image of his face in that moment when our eyes met. Not angry, not accusatory, just sad, disappointed, like he'd expected better from me and was quietly adjusting his expectations downward. The bedroom door was locked. I woke up Sunday morning to the sound of Nate's cartoons playing in the living room and the smell of pancakes. For a moment, everything felt normal, until I remembered the locked bedroom door and the couch cushions still bearing the imprint of where I'd spent the night. Caleb was at the stove, flipping pancakes with mechanical precision while Nate chatted about his favorite cartoon characters. Neither of them looked up when I entered the kitchen. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "Morning, Mummy." Nate bounced in his chair. "Daddy made pancakes with chocolate chips." "I see that." I looked at Caleb, waiting for him to acknowledge me, but he just continued cooking. "Sleep well?" I tried. "Fine," he said without turning around. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Nate, oblivious to the tension, kept up his steady stream of 7-year-old commentary about everything from his pancakes to his plans for the day. Caleb responded to him normally, warmly even, but continued to treat me like I was invisible. My phone buzzed with notifications, more comments on the party photos, more shares, more people weighing in on my night out. Most were supportive, friends from work saying I looked great, college acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly sliding into my DMs to say I seemed so happy and so free. But there were other comments too, subtle ones that made my stomach clench. Interesting party pics, Ottilie. Caleb working late again. That guy's cute. Single. I deleted the obviously problematic ones, but the damage was spreading. In our small social circle, everyone knew everyone, and a married woman dancing intimately with a strange man was exactly the kind of gossip that traveled fast. "I'm taking Nate to the park," Caleb announced, finally speaking directly to me. "We'll be back around lunch." "I could come with you," I offered. "We're good," he said, and something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a family outing. This was him removing our son from whatever conversation he expected us to have later. After they left, I tried to enjoy the quiet apartment, but my phone kept buzzing. A text from Priya. "Need to talk Monday about company image and social media policies." A message from my mother-in-law, Miriam. "Saw some concerning photos online. Is everything all right?" But the worst was from Lydia. "Call me, now." I knew that tone. My older sister had perfected it during our childhood, the voice of disappointed authority that made me feel like a scolded child no matter how old I got. "What the hell were you thinking?" she said the moment she picked up. "Good morning to you too, Lydia." "Don't. I saw the pictures, Ottilie. Everyone saw the pictures. You're all over social media, hanging on some random guy, while your husband is God knows where." "He was supposed to be working," I said defensively. "I didn't know he was coming." "So that makes it okay? You're married, not dead. There's a difference between having fun and—" She paused, clearly trying to find the right words. "What were you thinking?" I found myself repeating the justifications I'd rehearsed in my head all morning. Caleb's emotional distance, the loneliness, how long it had been since anyone made me feel attractive or interesting, how I deserved to feel good about myself. "You sound like every cheating spouse who ever got caught," Lydia said bluntly. "It's all his fault. You were lonely. You deserve better. Do you hear yourself?" "I didn't cheat," I snapped. "I danced with someone. I had a conversation." "You were practically dry humping him on the dance floor, Ottilie. And then you posted about it online like you were proud of it." "Maybe I am proud of it. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible in my own life." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. "You have a 7-year-old son," she finally said, "and a husband who, whatever his faults, doesn't deserve to be humiliated publicly. Figure out what you want, but stop acting like a teenager having a rebellion." She hung up before I could respond. I spent the rest of the morning alternating between anger and anxiety. Anger at Lydia for judging me, at Caleb for his dramatic silent treatment, at everyone who felt entitled to opinions about my life. But underneath the anger was a growing knot of worry about the photos, the comments, the way this was spiraling beyond my control. When Caleb and Nate returned, I was ready to have a mature conversation about what happened. I'd apologize for the dancing, explain that it meant nothing, promise to be more careful about appearances in the future. We were adults. We could work through this. But Caleb had other plans. "Nate, why don't you play in your room for a while?" he said as they came through the door. "Mommy and I need to talk." Once Nate was safely out of earshot, Caleb turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, exactly. More like businesslike. "I've been thinking about last night," he said. "Caleb, I can explain." "No need." He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. "I've seen all the explanations I need." It was my Instagram story, the one where I'd captioned the party photo, finally letting loose. But now I could see it from his perspective. His wife, celebrating being photographed in another man's arms, broadcasting it to everyone we knew. "That was stupid," I admitted. I was upset and I wasn't thinking clearly. You were upset, he repeated slowly. About what exactly? About us? About how we never talk anymore? About how you're always working? About how I feel like I'm invisible in my own marriage? So you decided to make yourself very visible with someone else. It wasn't like that. He was just being nice to me, paying attention. The way a husband should. Yes, exactly. I felt a surge of hope that he was finally understanding. I don't want attention from other men, Caleb. I want it from you. He nodded thoughtfully. I see, so this is my fault. Not fault exactly, but we both contributed to the problems in our marriage. Interesting. He scrolled through his phone again. And these messages from him today, are those also my fault? My blood went cold. What messages? He showed me screenshots of texts from Rafe, flirty messages about what a great time he'd had, how he couldn't stop thinking about our conversation, suggestions for when we could meet up again. Messages that I'd responded to with enthusiasm and heart emojis. How did you left your phone on the kitchen counter this morning. It kept buzzing. I felt the ground shifting under my feet. Caleb, those messages don't mean anything. I was just being polite. Polite. He scrolled to my response where I'd told Rafe I'd love to see him again soon. Very polite. Okay, maybe I was flirting a little, but it's my fault because I work too much and don't pay enough attention to you. I didn't say that. You said exactly that. He put his phone away. I've been thinking about what you said, actually, about being invisible, about feeling neglected. And you're right, I have been working a lot lately. I've been distracted. Relief flooded through me. I'm glad you can see that. I can, so I've decided to make some changes. That's great. I think if we both try harder, I'm going to be much more attentive to what's happening in our marriage, he continued. Much more aware of what you're doing, who you're talking to, where you're going. I clearly haven't been paying close enough attention. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. His face was calm, pleasant even, but his eyes were different. Colder, more focused. What do you mean? I mean I'm going to be a much more involved husband. Starting now. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think we both learned something important last night. Before I could ask what he meant, Nate came running back into the room, full of questions about lunch and afternoon plans. Caleb switched seamlessly into dad mode, warm and attentive with our son, while continuing to treat me with polite, distant courtesy. That night, he slept in the guest room again. When I tried to talk to him about it, he just said he thought we both needed space to think about what we wanted from our marriage. I lay awake in our empty bed, scrolling through the comments on the party photos that kept multiplying. Most were still supportive, but there were new ones that made my skin crawl. Marriage must be rough if she's shopping around. Poor Caleb. Someone's having a midlife crisis. I deleted the worst ones, but they kept coming. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb's sudden reasonableness was more dangerous than anger would have been. Monday morning brought a new level of humiliation. I walked into the office to find clusters of co-workers who stopped talking the moment they saw me. Priya was waiting at my desk with a coffee and a grim expression. Conference room, she said quietly. Now. The meeting was brief and mortifying. Someone had sent the party photos to the HR department with a complaint about unprofessional conduct and inappropriate behavior at company events. While technically I hadn't violated any policies, it was after hours, off company property, and I wasn't representing the company. Priya made it clear that my judgment was being questioned. The insurance industry is conservative, Ottilie, she explained. Our clients trust us to be stable, reliable people. When employees become the subject of gossip and speculation about their personal lives, it reflects on all of us. It was just dancing, I protested, but the word sounded weak even to me. It was just dancing that's now been shared across 3 different social media platforms with commentary about your marriage. That's not just dancing anymore. She handed me a printed copy of the company's social media policy, highlighted in yellow. The message was clear: be more careful or face consequences. I spent the rest of the day fielding whispered comments and pointed looks. Some co-workers were supportive, telling me I looked great and deserved to have fun, but others were clearly judging me, and the divide was creating tension throughout the office. The worst part was the screenshots. Someone had taken pictures of my text exchanges with Rafe and was sharing them in group chats. Messages that had seemed harmless in the moment now looked damning when stripped of context and spread around like evidence of infidelity. By lunch, I was ready to escape. I met Rafe at a trendy rooftop bar downtown, telling myself I needed someone who understood what I was going through. "You look stressed," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. In daylight, away from the party atmosphere, he looked younger, less polished. But his attention was still intoxicating after the morning I'd had. "My husband saw the photos," I said, accepting the martini he'd ordered for me. "Ah, drama at home?" "He's being weird about it. Not angry, just cold. Like he's planning something." Rafe shrugged. "Guys like that always think they're playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers. He's probably just trying to make you sweat." "Maybe." I took a long sip of my drink. Everyone at work is talking about it too. My boss basically told me to keep my personal life more private. "That's bullshit. You weren't doing anything wrong." It was exactly what I needed to hear. Rafe listened as I vented about Caleb's emotional distance, about feeling trapped in a marriage that had become more like a business partnership, about how long it had been since anyone made me feel desirable. "You're too young to settle for that," he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Life's too short to spend it with someone who doesn't appreciate what he has." We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his events business, his travels, his philosophy about living authentically and not apologizing for wanting more from life. It was intoxicating, this vision of myself as someone brave enough to pursue happiness instead of just accepting whatever scraps of affection came my way. "I'm organizing a gallery opening next weekend," he said as we prepared to leave. "You should come. Bring some friends, make it a girls' night out." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. We hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, and I felt that same electric thrill from the party. Someone found me interesting enough to spend an afternoon with. Someone thought I was worth pursuing. I was still glowing from the attention when I got home to find Lydia sitting in my living room with Caleb and Nate. "Surprise," Nate announced. "Aunt Lydia brought cookies." "We need to talk," Lydia said, her expression making it clear this wasn't a social visit. Caleb took Nate to his room to play, leaving Lydia and me alone. She waited until she heard the bedroom door close, before turning to me with barely contained fury. "A rooftop bar? Really? You're having lunch dates now?" "How did you—" I started, then stopped. In a city this size, someone was always watching. Someone was always ready to text my sister, or post on social media, or add fuel to the gossip fire. "Sarah Morrison saw you. She was having lunch with a client and spotted you holding hands with some guy she didn't recognize." "We weren't holding hands," I protested, but even as I said it, I remembered Rafe touching my hand across the table, the way I'd leaned into the contact. "This is insane, Otili. You have a family, you have a reputation, you have a career that you're apparently determined to destroy." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm finally living my life instead of just existing in it." "You're having an affair." "I am not having an affair." The words came out louder than I intended. I'm talking to someone who actually listens to me, who makes me feel like I matter. When's the last time Caleb did that? When's the last time you tried to talk to Caleb instead of running to some stranger for validation? "I've been trying for months. He works, he comes home, he plays with Nate, he goes to bed. I might as well be furniture for all the attention he pays me." Lydia stared at me for a long moment. "Do you hear yourself? You sound like a child throwing a tantrum because mommy and daddy aren't paying enough attention to you. Don't you dare." You're 32 years old, Ottilie. You're a mother. You're a wife. And you're acting like a teenager who just discovered boys exist. Maybe because I feel like I never got to be a teenager. I got married young, had a baby, settled into this suburban life where the most exciting thing that happens is grocery shopping and PTA meetings. And that's Caleb's fault? It's nobody's fault. It just is what it is, and I'm tired of it. So get a divorce, go to counseling, join a book club, take up salsa dancing. There are 1,000 ways to add excitement to your life that don't involve humiliating your husband and confusing your son. Nate doesn't know anything about this. Nate knows his parents aren't sleeping in the same room. He knows something's wrong. Kids aren't stupid, Ottilie. That hit harder than I expected. I thought about Nate's questions over the weekend, the way he'd looked between Caleb and me during breakfast, trying to figure out why the atmosphere felt different. This isn't just about me being bored, I said quietly. There are real problems in our marriage. Then fix them. With your husband, not with some random guy you met at a party. Before I could respond, Caleb emerged from Nate's room. He looked between Lydia and me, clearly reading the tension. Everything okay? Fine, I said quickly. Actually, no, Lydia said. I think you two need to have a serious conversation about what's happening here. Caleb nodded slowly. I agree. Ottilie, can we talk privately? Lydia gathered her purse and kissed Nate goodbye, but not before pulling me aside in the hallway. I love you, she said quietly, but I love that little boy in there too, and I love Caleb. Figure out what you want, but stop dragging everyone else through your crisis. After she left, Caleb and I sat on the couch while Nate played in his room. The apartment felt too quiet, too tense. Lydia's worried about you, he said finally. Lydia's judging me. Maybe, or maybe she can see something you can't. He turned to face me fully. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about feeling invisible, about needing attention. And I think you're right. I have been distracted lately. Work's been demanding, and I've let other things slide. I felt a surge of hope. I'm glad you can see that. I can, but I've also been thinking about the photos, about the messages, about your lunch today. My heart sank. Caleb. I'm not angry, he said, and his calm tone was somehow more unsettling than yelling would have been. I'm just clarifying some things in my mind. What kind of things? About what I want from this marriage, about what I'm willing to accept and what I'm not. He stood up, smoothing down his shirt. I think we both need some time to think about what we really want. What does that mean? It means I'm going to be paying much closer attention to everything from now on. And you're going to need to decide if you want to be married to me or if you want to keep exploring other options. Those aren't mutually exclusive. I can work on our marriage and still have friends. Friends. He smiled, but it was cold. Is that what we're calling it? That night, he slept in the guest room again. And when I checked my phone before bed, I found that he'd changed the password on our shared Netflix account, our joint credit card app, and the family calendar we used to coordinate schedules. Small changes, subtle ones, but they felt like the first moves in a game I didn't know we were playing. The video appeared on Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Text after text, tagged posts, direct messages, all pointing to the same thing. Someone had taken video at the company party, and it was making the rounds on social media. The footage was damning. 30 seconds of me and Rafe dancing, laughing, his hands on my waist, my hand on his chest. The lighting made it look more intimate than it had felt in the moment, and the angle caught every touch, every laugh, every moment when I'd leaned into him. But the worst part was the timestamp. The video clearly showed Caleb in the background, watching. You could see the exact moment he set down my jacket and walked away, and somehow that made everything look even more sordid. The comments were brutal. This is so embarrassing for her husband. Imagine coming to surprise your wife and finding this. She's not even trying to hide it. By the time I got to work, the video had been shared in at least 3 different group chats that included my co-workers. Priya was waiting for me again, but this time she wasn't alone. Janet from HR sat in the conference room with a printed copy of our previous conversation and a very serious expression. "We need to discuss your social media presence," Janet said without preamble. "This video has been brought to our attention by multiple employees and at least one client." "I didn't post that video," I protested. "I can't control what other people share." "But you can control your behavior at company events," Priya said, "and your response to being recorded." They showed me my own social media activity from the past few days. The party photos I'd shared, my responses to comments, my check-ins at restaurants and bars. Taken together, it painted a picture of someone whose personal drama was becoming very public. "We're not asking you to live like a nun," Janet explained, "but we are asking you to consider how your actions reflect on the company. Our clients need to trust that their representatives are stable, professional people. This is my personal life. Your personal life became public the moment that video started circulating. 3 different clients have called asking about the situation with one of our administrators. That makes it a business problem. They didn't fire me, but they made it clear I was on thin ice. Any more drama, any more public embarrassment, and we'd be having a different conversation." I spent my lunch break in my car, crying and scrolling through the comments that kept multiplying. Some people were defending me, saying I had every right to dance with whoever I wanted, but others were dissecting my marriage, speculating about what must be wrong at home, making jokes about desperate housewives and midlife crises. The worst comments came from people who knew Caleb, his co-workers, our neighbors, parents from Nate's school, people who'd watched our marriage from the outside and apparently had opinions about what they were seeing. "Caleb's such a good guy. This is so unfair to him. Poor Nate. Kids always suffer when parents act like this. I always thought she seemed high maintenance." My phone rang, interrupting my spiral of self-pity. It was Miriam, Caleb's mother. "Ottilie," she said, her voice arctic. "We need to talk." "Hi, Miriam. How are you?" "I've been better. I've been getting calls all morning about a video of you at some party." My stomach dropped. "Miriam, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You always have explanations. But I'm not calling for explanations. I'm calling to tell you that if you continue to humiliate my son publicly, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that involve lawyers and custody arrangements, and making sure my grandson isn't damaged by his mother's poor judgment." The line went dead. I sat in my car, shaking. Miriam had never liked me much. She thought Caleb had married too young, settled too quickly. But she'd always been civil for Nate's sake. This was different. This was a threat. When I got home that evening, Caleb was in the kitchen making dinner while Nate did homework at the table. The scene looked perfectly normal except for the manila folder sitting next to Caleb's laptop. "How was your day?" he asked pleasantly. "Terrible. Your mother called me." "I heard. She's upset." "She threatened me, Caleb. She talked about lawyers and custody." He nodded, stirring something on the stove. "She's protective of family." "I'm family too." "Are you?" He turned to look at me, and his expression was genuinely curious. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying very hard not to be." "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You're having lunch dates with other men, sharing intimate moments that get broadcast online, making our private problems public entertainment. What part of that says, committed family member to you?" I wanted to argue, but Nate was right there, pretending to focus on his math homework while clearly listening to every word. "Can we talk about this later?" I said quietly. "Of course. I have some things to show you anyway." He gestured toward the manila folder. "After Nate goes to bed." Dinner was excruciating. Caleb chatted normally with Nate about school and friends and weekend plans, but every interaction between us was stilted and formal. We sounded like polite strangers sharing a meal. After Nate was settled in his room, Caleb opened the folder. "I've been doing some research," he said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. "About social media, about digital footprints, about how these things work in family court." My blood went cold. Family court? Just research. Being thorough. He showed me printouts of the party video, screenshots of my text conversations with Rafe, copies of my social media posts from the past week. It's amazing how much information is out there once you start looking. "Caleb, you're scaring me." "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to understand what's happening to our family." He pulled out another sheet of paper. "This is our joint credit card statement. 3 charges at restaurants I've never been to, all in the past week. Want to explain those?" I stared at the charges. Lunch with Rafe, coffee with a girlfriend who'd wanted to hear all the gossip, drinks with a coworker who'd been supportive about my situation. Innocent expenses that looked damning when presented as evidence. "Those are just meals, Caleb. I have to eat lunch." "At expensive restaurants with men who aren't your husband." "One of those was with Sarah from accounting." "One of them." He circled 2 other charges. "What about these?" I felt trapped, like every normal activity had been twisted into evidence of wrongdoing. "I'm allowed to have friends. I'm allowed to eat meals with people." "Of course you are. I'm just trying to understand the pattern." He gathered the papers back into a neat stack. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the new clothes, the sudden interest in going out all the time. "What new clothes?" He pulled out another receipt. "Nordstrom, last weekend, $200. I remembered that shopping trip. I'd bought a dress for Rafe's gallery opening, something that made me feel attractive and confident. But looking at the receipt in Caleb's hands, it felt like evidence of deception. "I bought one dress." "For what occasion?" I hesitated too long. "Just to have something nice." "For your friend's art show." My heart stopped. "How did you—" "You left the event invitation on your dresser. This Saturday, downtown gallery, +1. He looked at me steadily. "Were you planning to tell me about it?" "I was thinking about going with Lydia," I lied. "Were you?" "Because when I called Lydia today, she seemed surprised to hear about any art show." I felt like I was drowning. Every lie led to another question. Every explanation revealed another layer of deception I hadn't even realized I was building. "I haven't made definite plans yet," I said weakly. "I see." Caleb closed the folder. "Well, when you do make definite plans, I'd appreciate being kept in the loop, for scheduling purposes." "Scheduling purposes?" "Childcare. If you're going out Saturday night, I need to know so I can plan accordingly." His tone was businesslike, practical. "I'm trying to be more organized about these things." That night, lying alone in our bed while he slept in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. A week ago, I'd been a bored housewife looking for a little excitement. Now I felt like a suspect in my own life, with every action scrutinized and catalogued. My phone buzzed with a text from Rafe. "Still on for Saturday? Can't wait to see you in something beautiful." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding, but I kept the dress. Saturday morning arrived with an envelope slipped under our apartment door. I found it while Caleb was making breakfast, my name written in unfamiliar handwriting across expensive-looking paper. Inside was a formal notice from a law firm downtown. A consultation appointment had been scheduled for Monday morning at 10 a.m. The subject line read, "Marital assets and custody arrangements." My hands shook as I read it twice, 3 times, trying to make sense of the legal language. But the message was clear. Someone had taken the first steps toward divorce proceedings. "Caleb," I called, my voice barely steady. "We need to talk." He appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand, looking perfectly calm. "Find something interesting." I held up the letter. "What is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like." "You made an appointment with a divorce lawyer?" I made an appointment with a family law attorney. There's a difference. Not much of one. Nate looked up from his cereal, sensing the tension. Caleb moved smoothly into damage control mode, sending our son to his room to get dressed, while I stood frozen in the kitchen, clutching the legal notice. Once we were alone, Caleb sat down across from me with his coffee, as calm as if we were discussing weekend plans. I told you I was going to be more attentive to what's happening in our marriage, he said. This is me being attentive. This is you threatening me. This is me protecting my interests, and Nate's interests. I'm his mother. Yes, you are, and I'm his father. And lately, his mother has been making choices that could affect his stability, his security, his future. Caleb pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo. This was taken yesterday. It was a picture of me and Rafe having coffee at a cafe downtown. We were sitting close together, his hand covering mine on the table, both of us laughing. We looked like lovers meeting in secret. Where did you get this? Does it matter? The point is, it exists, along with all the others. Others? He scrolled through his phone, showing me image after image. Me and Rafe at the rooftop bar. Me leaving work early on Wednesday to meet him for lunch. Me shopping for the dress I'd planned to wear to his gallery opening. A week's worth of clandestine meetings, documented and catalogued. You've been having me followed. I've been paying attention, like you said I should. I felt sick. Every innocent coffee, every harmless lunch, every moment of connection with someone who made me feel alive. It all looked sordid and calculated when presented as evidence. These don't prove anything, I said weakly. Don't they? A married woman, meeting secretly with another man, spending marital assets on new clothes and expensive meals, lying to her husband about her whereabouts. He put his phone away. What do you think they prove? That I have a friend? That you're having an affair? I am not having an affair. Then what would you call it? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. What would I call it? The flirting, the secret meetings, the emotional intimacy I'd been sharing with Rafe instead of my husband. The way my heart raced when his name appeared on my phone. The dress hanging in my closet, bought specifically to look beautiful for him. I haven't slept with him, I said finally. Yet. The word hung in the air between us. Because he was right, I hadn't crossed that line yet, but I'd been thinking about it, planning for it maybe. The gallery opening tonight was supposed to be our first real date, our first time alone together without the pretense of casual friendship. So what happens now? I asked. Now you decide what you want. You can end this thing with him, delete his number, never see him again, and we can try to work on our marriage. Or you can keep doing what you're doing, and I'll proceed with protecting myself and my son. Our son. My son, he corrected quietly. Because if you choose him over us, you're not really Nate's mother anymore. You're just a woman who used to live here. The cruelty of it took my breath away. You can't keep me from my child. I can't and I won't, but I can make sure he's not damaged by your choices. I can make sure he has stability and consistency and a parent who puts his needs first. I do put his needs first. Do you? When you're sneaking around with other men? When you're creating public scandals that affect his reputation at school? When you're turning our home into a war zone? Caleb leaned forward slightly. When's the last time you helped him with homework? When's the last time you asked about his day without being distracted by your phone? I tried to remember and couldn't. The past week had been a blur of secret meetings and damage control and emotional drama. Had I been neglecting Nate? Had my son been watching his family fall apart while I was focused on my own needs? I love him, I whispered. I know you do, but love isn't enough if you're not willing to act like it. Nate walked in, and Caleb snapped back into dad mode, park, lunch, movie, while my marriage cratered silently. All day I floated between two choices: cut Rafe off and return to routine, or go to the gallery and taste a life that felt like mine again. The dress fit like a forgotten self. Rafe texted, excited. Then I heard a woman in our living room. The papers are ready. We can file Monday. Caleb thanked her for being thorough, custody strong. My knees buckled. He knocked. I opened the door in the dress, phone in hand. He scanned me, quiet. I see you chose. I left anyway.